Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Montfort University and the East Midlands Energy Institute's talk on energy recovery from fatbergs. Tonight, we're really fortunate to have a professor at DMU, Raffaella Villa, who's also one of my colleagues, and she's going to talk to us about energy recovery from fatbergs. I know that in her last job, Raffi was nicknamed the Queen of Fats, Oils and Greases. So, and she may or may not explain what that means in the talk. Anyway, just so that you know, tonight's talk is going to be recorded, so there'll be a video prepared which we'll make available on the East Midlands Energy Institute website afterwards, and we'll also make available a PDF of the slides of the talk. During the talk, if you have questions that occur to you, please type them into the Q&A in the side at the chat, and at the end of the talk, we'll collect the questions together and ask them to Raffi, who will address the questions. And of course, if you have any other questions after that, you can always ask them at the end of the talk as well. So I think we'll hand over now to Raffi, and please enjoy this evening's talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick. That was a bit cheeky to mention my Queen of Fog. Yeah, so thank you for having me tonight, and you know, to take you through this. It's a little bit gruesome, but it's something that everybody enjoy, you know, fatbergs. So what this is mostly work that I've done at my previous institution, so I will acknowledge that at the end, just to make it clear. And but it's work that we have developed over a set number of years, so about 10 years. So you will see why, and you know, I'm going to cover a little bit more just the energy from fatberg. So yeah, ideally, what I like to cover tonight is why fatberg, why are we interested in fatberg, what are they, where they come from, how they form, and you know, energy because that's an important issue, especially with material like fatberg, that is waste material. So why are we interested in fatberg? Well, they are a nuisance. Obviously, there's a lot of sewer blockages caused by fatbergs. Fatbergs is a new word. It was created in sort of 2000, and I think it was about 17 or 17 when we had the big blockage in London. Before that, we refer to this material as fog, fat, oil, and grease. Over the ocean in America, they call them frog, fat, roots, oil, and grease, because they have a lot of concrete sewers, and roots are one part of the problem, because obviously fats, the roots act as a filter, and fat attach very easily to this material. So anyway, so that fatberg is been around for a fog and fatberg have been around for a while. They're mainly due to our change in diet, the fact that we eat out a lot. There's a lot of cooking, and our eating style is changed, and we're eating fatter food. So they are a problem because this material is now discharging to the sewers. There's you know, a lot of blockages. There's pumping station failure. There's sewer overflows, water pollution. There's also an impact, kind of unquantifiable impact on the treatment plant. Some of the research suggests about 10% of additional cost because of this material. So it's kind of a problem, and obviously, and you can see the image of the poor guy, you know, sort of shoveling the material out of the sewers is quite an unpleasant thing to deal with. It costs a lot of money, and they are the cause of the majority of the blockages in the UK. It's not just our problem. As I said, I think in the US, the problem started. Have I lost? Am I still sharing?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So over the ocean, they started worrying about the problem a little bit earlier than us. And when we started working on fat oil in Greece, it was 2008, 2009. America was a little bit ahead of us. They have quite big fatberg as well. 140 ton, 190 ton in Detroit. Obviously, the first one was London. I think we had the most recent one was Liverpool. Sidmouth was quite a big one. We had one in Birmingham recently. And then, Singapore had a lot of problem with blockages linked to fat, and Australia. So in Europe as well, but I think there's a bit of a difference in the way that the sewer is managed, and so and combined sewer seems to be quite an issue, an important factor. So what is the material made of? So this is there was a program on telly about the Fatberg autopsy, and we analyzed some of this material. Obviously, there is a lot of fat. There's some water in it, but there's other things such as grits and metal and ash, and there's another component, and I'm going to discuss this other component in a while. And of course, there's loads and loads and loads of wipes, and that's you can see the pile, and we contributed to the autopsy, and I have to say, material down the drains, material down the sewers was relatively clean if it was not for the wipes. So there was a lot of things that shouldn't have been there. But where this oil come from? Well, as I said, mainly from our cooking activities, and we're not talking about used cooked oil, which is what most people think about when we talk about fatbergs. Is not the oil that is recovered from fryers that can be turned into nice clean biodiesel. Is more oil that comes from the cleaning process. So the cleaning of pans, cleaning of plates, the canopies, the extractors in the kitchen. So I'm talking mainly about obviously restaurant kitchens, but also household kitchens. So the roast dinner, fat poured on the drain, or the pan where you fried your steaks, clean in the sink, and all this material kind of accumulated gradually. So it's not cooked oil; it's something slightly different. But there's also sorry, this was supposed to be an on. So, and again, I'm kind of done a bit of a calculation with using data that I found, around oil consumption and disposal of oil. So in Europe, we use, I'm using, I know that we're not in Europe anymore, but sorry, we use about 30 million tons of oil, which is not just used of edible oil, which is not just used for food preparation. You can see that schematic on your left-hand side. Some of it goes in animal feed. There's some technical use of oil, and there's a lot of oil that is used still for biodiesel production. there was a nice project, I think it was called Recoil, a European project, where they calculated the potential of biodiesel from used cooked oil, UCO, used cooked oil, which is what I was referring before as, oil coming from fryers, from McDonald's, from Burger King. So that's usually disposed of properly, and some of it actually goes into recycling and biodiesel. And a lot of it is consumed. And again, this is my kind of calculation, and about 20% is actually the one that is not, it comes from the cleaning process, is disposed into drains. So it's quite a lot of material. So I've used the same percentages. I know how much edible oil we consume in the UK is about 500,000 tonnes per year. So using the same proportion, obviously this is an approximation, but I wanted just to understand how much material was disposed in the drains. And that, again, that's my calculation suggests about 59,000 tonnes per year. So it's a lot of material. You will see there's actually is only an underestimation. So we got so much oil going down the drains, and we lose the value of this material because we have put a lot of energy in producing the material, not forget water that we put into producing the material, which is as precious as energy, and a lot of it, 20% or more, is lost into the drains. But there's also another component that we are, often forget because it's not as predominant, it's not as obvious, but is fat, the soap present into our personal care product. So if I go back a couple of slides just to show you, apologies for the animation. This is the composition of our fatberg. So the fatberg contains, and it's not just the fatberg that I analyze, is the fatberg that also similar numbers are being found in the US and in other studies in other parts of the world. So the main acid present in the fatberg is palmitic, which is a C16. But if you look at the composition of the most used cooking oil in the UK, sunflower oil, palmitic is not very high. Palmitic is mainly found obviously in animal fat or animal, but still that composition is very, very skew. And this can be due to a lot of things. It could be a kind of a degradation of the acid, or but my suggestion is that part of it comes also from our personal care product, because very similar acid are also used in personal care products. And again, I'll explain to you in a minute how and why. Obviously, if you look at the fatty acid salt used in personal care products, is much, much lower. We are talking about 10 times, at least 10 times less than the fat used in cooking. So again, I'm not blaming the personal care industry, but I'm just suggesting that there is also that component. So how does the fatberg form? And this is quite important because this is a very, very hard material. So I don't know if you've ever seen it, you can Google the video how to clean the fatberg. But the poor people that have to clean the fatberg, well, usually they jet the sewers, and some of it is actually hand removed, so people have to go down and remove this material. It's actually really hard material. So how do we go from you know, the soft material that is the fat that we cook with, to that fatberg that is hard and difficult to remove. So this is something that we are still working on, you know, because it's not completely clear, but we know that there's different reaction involved into the process. So there's a triggering reaction, which is, you know, what caused the precipitation, initial precipitation and initial attachment of this material onto the sewers. And then a kind of a maturation process where the fat becomes hard and is difficult to remove. And we have identified 5 reactions, and I'll take you through the reaction as we go along. So first of all, there's a standard fat solidification. So is, you know, when we cook a steak, if you leave the residual into the pan, you get that the fat becomes solid, and that's what happens in the sewers as well. It actually happens in our veins as well if we eat too much fat. So it is a common problem elsewhere. So there's a solidification, but there's also what we call a saponification. And again, if you think about the old way of soap making, you know, the one that our ancestors used to use was fat, ash, which is, you know, our kind of catalyst, and heat, and that material on the 2 bits of material. I don't know if I can use my, oh yes I can, laser pointer here. This material here are a fatberg from Whitechapel. And so this is the material that I analyzed, and this is dried fatberg. So we just put it into the dryer, and it always kind of fascinates me how similar it is. If you look at the material, how similar it is to soap, and so there's obviously, and we are not, as I said, we're not the only one that found that link. And if I think back at that, you know, that comment that I made to you about personal care products, you know, if you think when you have a traditional bath with a traditional soap, you know, you have that, you know, if you live in a hard water area, you get that kind of scum. I think it's called scum, but it's just the soap going from a soluble salt, which is the sodium salt, to an insoluble salt, which is a calcium salt. So and something similar might happen also in the sewers, or you know, again. So if you look at that material, is quite soapy like. So fat are a big issue, and they are the major the major component of this material, either through different processes, solidification, saponification, but also, you know, that maturation process whereby the solidified fat, which is soft, becomes hard, you know. So that's it. But there's also other things, you know. There's bacteria in there. There's biofilm forming, growing on the surface inside the fatberg. This is a biofilm. This is a biofilm on a pipe of clean water. Can you imagine what kind of biofilm grows into a sewer? You know, there's a lot of, you know, bacteria that are thriving on that, and they can cement that material. There's also protein precipitation, and again, this is something that is an epiphany, let's call it, that I had one day. I was in London for a fatberg meeting, and I stopped for a coffee, And I realized that every time someone has a cappuccino or a latte, which is a majority of people in the UK, you know, the person that prepared the cappuccino or the latte rinse the brick and pour the milk down the drain, and that milk is rich in protein and fat. And if you think of what happens to your milk when it goes sour, you got that kind of, or when people make cheese, you've got that salting out of the protein. The protein comes out of solution and precipitate and bring all the fat with them. And so, and I thought actually that's something that could happen also in the Suez, because we analyzed the water, we analyzed the effluent of the kitchens, and kitchen discharge can be at pH as high as 11 when they come out, for example, from a dishwasher. So, you know, that could happen as well. You know, that could be also a triggering factor. And then there's also starch, which is something that we, again, is very sticky material, and it could also be complicated. So why does it form and how does it form? We're still not fully clear. And why is it important? Well, it is important because unless we understand how it forms, it's really difficult to bioremediate or remediate the process. So we do need to understand the process. And of course, yeah, as I said, you know, there's a lot of white that help keeping everything together, which is you know, not very nice. So how do we, first of all, how do we manage it? And you know, it seems quite you know, out of scope for this presentation, but actually managing links a little bit, well, links a lot to the energy recovery. So first of all, best kitchen management practice. So try to avoid, you know, pouring things down the drain, etc. So if possible, you know, the cooked oil, the fat left over from a roast chicken should be collected separately. But also, you know, it is important for especially FSC, so for food service establishment, for restaurants or, you know, cafes, to have a grease separator. So a mean of separating the fat that goes down the drains. And at the moment, we only have our building regulation says that every restaurant should have an effective mean of fog removal, but there's not any kind of requirement for kitchen to have it. They're a little bit stricter in other European countries, and a lot of in a lot of other countries it's compulsory to have a grease separators. And so there are different types. This is the results from a survey that we've done in 2 towns. So it's quite a kind of reliable set of data. And 70% of restaurants still do nothing. They're still just discharging everything in the drains. Which again, if we link to the initial slide, is a massive waste of resources. 7.6% use biological dosing, which is a permitted way of treating the material, but that's about 20%. So the remainder that use other means of use. So either grease intercept. They're all similar devices that separate grease from water on a Stokes-Low principle. Grease interceptors are a little bit bigger and they get emptied regularly, so the fat is mixed with the water, so it's actually quite a kind of difficult, and there's a lot of solid as well in there. So it's quite a difficult material to use. There's also grease removal unit and grease trap, which are a much smaller unit where the oil is usually separated out, so that can be easily used for example, energy purposes. So that would be an important step for a restaurant, for example. So what can we do with this material? How do we get value out of it? Actually, there was in the past it was a very valuable material because of the glycerol. So the cooking fat is made mainly of 3-glyceride, which are a glycerol backbone with 3 long-chain fatty acid attached to it. So during the war, there was a campaign. This is mainly America, I have to say, to recover the fat for the glycerol. So that's one value. But obviously, as I said, there's a lot of energy into it. So where I'm going now is where is the energy coming from? So where do we get the energy from? So this study comes from an NGD with Thames Water. So we looked at the potential of recovering energy at catchment level. So Thames Water, having one of the first Fatberg problem, decided to look at the problem in a more holistic way and say, okay, so we've got this problem. Can we recover the material? And if we can recover the material, can we get energy out of it? And so we looked at different, the students looked at different outcomes. We analyzed the material that could be recovered at domestic. And you can see this is a kind of a very dark brown material because it's probably coming just from roast chicken or steaks or empty cans of tuna in my household usually. So that's the domestic. We looked at the material of coming from grease separators. So this is the domestic one was recovered post cooking process manually. The food service establishment was material recovered through grease separators. We looked at the fatberg. We looked at material that is collected into pumping stations, and then we looked at some of the fat that arrives at the sewage treatment plant. And if you remember the initial number, my initial number was 59,000 tons per year. From this study, we come up with a number of 95,000 tons per year from the Thames Water catchment. I mean, Thames Water is a big catchment, but as I said, my number was a massive underestimation. So it is much more the material that goes in is wasted basically. So what did we do next was to use this material to look for energy. Yeah, I'm finally arriving to the energy part. And guess what? We should have thought about that. We did know about that, but the further you move from the source, the less the energy content is of that material. But and it's a logical thing, we are putting material through sewers. We have combined sewers, so it's diluted, is contaminated, it changes its nature. So the less water, more heat, and the further from source, less energy content. So not only is important to remove a source because we are eliminating the problem of blockages, or the potential problem of blockages, but is also quite important because we recover more energy. And this is the energy recovering from restaurants. So the Thames Water agreed with some restaurant in their catchment to set up some grease recovery units, so they could recover the grease separator. I can't remember which one they were. Is a minefield. The company that makes them are really, they are quite attentive to the nomenclature, but the word, it was a mixture of type of grease recovery unit, and so they recovered material from the restaurants for about a year, and then we kind of we used that material to and we added that material to the biogas. We kind of there was we've done some work also on biodiesel, but the problem of this material and biodiesel is that is a very contaminated material. As I said, there's a lot of in grease trap, there's a lot of solids. It also on oil recovery household level, there was a lot of solid material, and also because it's usually left there for several weeks. There's a lot of an high percentage of free fatty acid. Now, when we use, I'm sure that you all know this, but when we use virgin oil to produce biodiesel, we do a transesterification process. So it's a one step, let's call it one step process. I know that is not just one step, but is one step process. The main reaction. If we have used cooked oil with a high percentage of free fatty acid, we then have to use a two-step process where we do transform all the triglyceride into fatty acid, and then we do a direct esterification to the fatty acid. So it's feasible, but it's a little bit more convoluted and costly. So one easy way for the company to recover energy is to add the material to their digester. They're already digesting sludge. They're already using that process for energy recovery. So they just add, it's just kind of a natural thing to add them to the system. There's always a but, of course, because not all the material can be added to the system. Don't dream of adding a kind of a fatberg to a digester, but some of the used oil or the fatberg from pumping station can be added to the digester in moderation. And I say that in moderation because the free fatty acid actually can be inhibitory to the process. So again, there's never a straight way of doing it. The level of energy look very small, but actually this is sewage sludge. So this is the whole the energy potential from biogas generation per year. So the sludge is the main material going into a digester. But what we discover is that removing a source at FSC would produce up to 222 gigawatt-hour per year as biogas, which would cover around 19% of the company energy needs. So it's actually quite a substantial amount of energy. And of course, you know, there's a lot of calculation that have gone into the thesis of the student, because there's obviously a balance between the cost of recovering this material, transporting the material, and the energy recovered. So that's up to Thames Water now to decide what to do. We also looked at you know, household recovery. So there's a calculation that we made. There was one study made by Thames Water several years back, and data collected by us. We had an average. We came up with an average of 2.3 kilos of material per year per household. So it's quite a substantial amount of fat. If you think about the number of households in, for example, London. And so, and again, what we came out is a very similar amount of energy if we go to biodiesel or to anaerobic digestion, is around 490 gigawatt hour per year. And obviously the current pathway is landfill, which even with an energy recovering process is much lower than what we would recover, you know, by collecting the fat at source. And again, a lot of discussion around how do we do that? Do we collect with waste? Obviously, there's an issue with you know, the fact that waste is not, you know, collected by the water company, is collected by the council or the waste management company. So there's a lot of you know, other issue attached to the record, but again, is a massive you know, resource that is currently being wasted. So almost at the end, message, easy take-home message: at source is cleaner material, and you know, down the sewers as a fatberg is more contamination, less energy, not worth doing it. So energy from fatberg, yes, in the sense that if we can get it before it becomes a fatberg. As I said, this is not just my work. There's a lot of work from a lot of students. There's about 6 there, and so and my colleague Bruce, with whom I work at Cranfield, and a lot of companies that have supported this work over the years. And that's me done.
Thank you very much, Rafi. So now we have some questions in the Q&A, and if any of you have some questions in your head that you haven't yet typed into the Q&A, please do so, and I will ask Rafi the questions, and I know she'll be happy to answer them afterwards. So the first question that we have is from Scott Borders, who asks, is there an energy loss associated with pumping systems due to the fatbergs, or does it generally relate to gravity-driven water systems?
Yeah, I think that one of the major problems at pumping station is also the impact of the fat onto the sensors, for example. So there's definitely kind of an issue. Yes, there's also energy. Yes, to answer the question, yes, there is a kind of a additional energy requirement for the presence of fat. Yeah.
Thanks, Rafi. And I've put in a couple of questions, but I was hoping not to have to use these, but again, I'll ask them because it may be that they're in other people's heads as well. I've noticed every time we roast a chicken that the fat from the chicken tends to separate into a kind of a jelly and a harder crust on top if you leave it. So what's going on there, first of all? And secondly, which of those two components is better from an energy recovery point of view?
I don't know. That's a tricky question. I don't know what the jelly is either. I think the other bit is the is the fat. I think the other bit is the energy content. The jelly, I don't know. I think is I think it's protein, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, no, it's definitely the oily bits, the solid bits, not the the crusty bit you called it. Yeah.
Thanks. And the other question that was in my mind, when you were talking about treatment of the fatberg in a digester, what would happen if we just fed bits of fatberg into an incinerator? Do you get a similar amount of energy out, or what?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because and I think maybe someone else in the audience might be better at answering that than me, because obviously there's a lot of grit, there's a lot of the content of metal is quite high, because you can imagine you got all the water coming from, you know, when it's combined sewers, so all the water coming from roads, which contains a lot of other stuff which we haven't analyzed for, and of course metal, heavy metal. So yes, I think incinerator would be a good solution, but I'm not sure about the impact on the incinerator itself, you know, of all this you know, grit and heavy metal. So it's something that again is the potential damage that you could cause worth the energy recovery. But I think thermal treatment is probably the best option for fatberg, yeah, for the solid, yeah.
Thanks, Rafi. Well, that's the end of our questions for now. So I think should we just wait for a couple of minutes in case anybody else has any other questions to ask?
I'm sure about. Come on.
Maybe they've all made their way to the to the loo.
I know. The Fatberg exhibition at the Museum of London was the exhibit that attracted the highest number of visitors. So yeah, so it was quite interesting to hear that they were not at all, you know, they did not expect at all to have so many people visiting the Fatberg.
I don't think many people I certainly didn't realize that it was that such things existed until relatively recently. You know, I guess I knew that you shouldn't tip fat down the sink, but I had no idea that it's solidified in that way. We have a question now from Phil, who says, wouldn't it be cheaper to design traps in sewers and extract the fat for energy conversion from there rather than collect from individual premises?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I think Thames Water has been thinking about that. There's a lot of, obviously there's an issue of who owns the trap, who's maintaining it. But I think Thames Water is thinking along those lines, you know, having a separator maybe at the bottom of an estate or something. Yeah, definitely. In terms of restaurant, no, I think individual restaurants are, you know, the restaurant produce enough grease to and yeah, there's enough grease produced in every premises. Of course, in UK we have the famous, you know, restaurant Kebab Ali, which are the one that where the you know, they're most culpable, maybe not most culpable, but where the major problem arise, and so yeah, maybe that again is who owns it and who maintains it, and I think that's once that, you know, that is cleared, definitely is a solution.
Thanks. We have a question from Tom, who asks, do we have any idea about methane emissions from the energy recovery processes?
Yeah, I mean, if you put it into a digester, ideally we recover as much as possible. There's some residual there, but yeah, usually is a controlled process. if it goes to landfill, then we got less control on the emissions, because obviously is a very different type of process. Yeah, shouldn't be, you know, it's the same as once it's in the digester, is the same emission as sludge. So
okay, and actually I have another question. Oh, there's a few more down here. Anonymous says, thank you very much for your nice presentation. Have you calculated the cost for energy recovery from the fatberg into energy?
Yes, so there's an old kind of at the end of the thesis, the student did a lot of calculation on, you know, the distance that the material needs to travel. Yeah, we have, you know, and for from some area in the catchment is not worth, the recovery is not worth, it's too costly for the, but obviously again, if you I think the bigger picture for water companies also how much it costs to maintain the system, how much does it cost to clean the system, and so you got to put that into account as well. So energy is only one part of the equation.
Thanks. We have a question from Dave who says, what is the material of wet wipes and do they cause a problem in digesters?
Yes, yeah. Ideally, I used to run this talk to the student with two jar, one with the toilet paper and one with the wet wipes. There's some additional material in wet wipes, which is usually man-made, is polyester or let me have a look. I usually have one here. Which is non-degradable. So what doesn't degrade into the sewer will not degrade into a digester. So it is you know, if it doesn't degrade aerobically, it's very unlikely to degrade anaerobically. So the wet wipes will go into it. If they go into a digester, will just act as a rag. They will, you know, they will stay in the system and mess up the system. So yeah, ideally wet wipes should not be discharged into the drain. There are wet wipes that are really degradable. Yeah, I would say if you are desperate to use wipes, have a go, put it into a glass before using it, before putting down the drain. Have a check, you know, if it dissolves within 10 minutes, it is degradable and it can be thrown down the drain. If it's not, yeah, and usually most of the wipes do not degrade very easily. There's a kind of synthetic components in it.
Thanks, Rafi. A few years ago, we had an interesting talk from a company called, I think they're called Shark, that take thermal energy out of sewers, out of sewer waste. And I know that there's quite a big business now developed in heat removal from sewers. Is there much heat that's worth recovering from fat that's disposed from restaurants and so on? And if we do, does it make it that much more difficult to dispose of the fatberg?
Yeah, well, actually, it's quite interesting because I was also involved in a project, an APSRC project on the impact of climate change on fatberg. For that reason, you know, and also the impact of discharging or extracting the heat from the sewers and the potential impact on, you know, fatberg. What we found was that there was not a lot of impact in terms of temperature. The temperature did not really change a lot of the deposition process. Heat from kitchen, not as much. The water coming out of, unless you got the kind of the burst of the dishwasher, which is mostly recycled. You don't have huge amount. The main bulk of the water is actually at ambient temperature. So So we didn't see a lot of heat potential recovery. Does it make sense? Is that?
Yeah, it does. Thanks. That's great. Well, I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. So I think at this point, I'll say thank you very much, Rafi. Fascinating talk. And yeah, it is. It's really interesting. And thanks to everyone who came along to listen and to ask questions especially. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.